Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so very excited to introduce you to Naomi Galliano. Now, Naomi has been with us now for close to 2 years. But what I love about Naomi is that she comes from a background where she was very committed to working in a family business. And it was through that particular journey that inspired her to be where she is now. So I'm not going to talk too much. I'm going to let Naomi have the floor. Naomi, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So what we like to do with these interviews is first get to know you a little bit in regards to who you were before you found Creatrix and Transformology. So can you talk to us a little bit, rewind the clock, where were you at in the lead up to 2 years ago?
Well, it's an interesting story actually. So for years I had been working in my husband's business as he has a business in construction. And when we got married, it's a funny story, he actually lost his license, and he kind of decided at that point, because he was, you know, the primary income earner, that it would be a good idea for me to take some leave from work and drive him around, but not just drive him around, but also work with him in the plastering business. So I learned how to plaster, which was not good for our marriage actually, but luckily it was only for about 12 to 18 months. And then within about a year after that, we decided to have kids together. So I didn't end up going back to full-time work. I continued to work in the family business. So in the lead up to me deciding to do Creatrix, about 3 years ago, one of our clients actually went into administration owing us a large sum of money. It wasn't the first time it had happened. It actually happened 3 years before that for a bigger amount, but we were able to cope quite well with it that time. Whereas this time, it really put us into big trouble, because for the first time in my life, we had lots of money in the bank. And we decided to spend it to do some renovations around the house. And I was so worried that when we started spending our savings, that, you know, things would start going wrong, because prior to that, the business was flying really high. We'd had great success. Everything was going really, really well. My daughter was actually at boarding school as well in Toowoomba, which is another story, but I'll tell you more about why that was later on. But everything was going really well. And we decided to do this pool reno. It was going to cost us way more than we planned. And then things started to go wrong, which was my biggest fear. And then this client went into administration owing us a huge sum of money. Our turnover dropped significantly and our margins were not the same. And basically, I had a bit of a mini breakdown, because I thought we were going to lose everything. I thought we were going to have to sell the house, that we were going to have to rent. We wouldn't have money to finish the renos. And, you know, we wouldn't be able to get what the house was worth because it was all unfinished. And what was even worse was I'd spent all this time in the family business instead of doing the things that I wanted to do, because I thought it was the right thing to do, right? And it kind of woke me up to, well, if we could lose everything when I've been doing all this stuff that I didn't want to do, well, I might as well just do what I want. So that was the major wake-up call, was when things started to go wrong. And I picked up a book that my sister had given me about, I don't know, 2 years before, that I hadn't even looked at, called The Secret, which I know is a bit of a ridiculous book, because, you know, you can't just create things into your life that easily, but it did remind me about a lot of principles that I'd built quite a good life on earlier on, before I met my husband, about being really conscious of your thoughts, creating your life on purpose, and being rather deliberate about your life. But when I got married, I pushed all that stuff aside because it was so airy-fairy, and my husband's such a logical, scientific kind of person. So I kind of, and it's something I did in relationships throughout my life, is I fit myself into his life, and I just started to kind of become that person that I thought I was supposed to be in a marriage, you know, that supportive wife, and, you know, just, yeah, I just kind of lost myself in the relationship, which I did in previous relationships as well. And that had been my life kind of leading up to when all of this happened. So that crisis was kind of the catalyst for me to stop and go, hang on a second, what am I doing? is this what I want to be doing? Is this who I am? And I realized too that the crisis that happened, I'd kind of drawn to me as well through not being deliberate about life and planning properly, creating what I wanted, but B, also through becoming negative and letting those old patterns, especially those old financial patterns with things going wrong, playing out in my life. So yeah, it was a scary time, but it was also probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And having made changes since then, now that we're faced with a very similar situation with coronavirus and how it's impacted our business, I'm in a totally different space now, and everything that's happening at the moment doesn't really matter because I know that we'll be okay. Yeah.
I love what you've said a few times in various ways, is that you had recognized there were patterns that had been playing out in your life. You know, one pattern was the way that you changed yourself to fit the person that you were in a relationship with. Another pattern was these money stories that were playing out consistently. And I guess this is a big point of difference as well when we talk about personal development, specifically for women with Creatrix, is that it's not just about, you know, temporarily changing the pattern or trying to change it through positive thinking. It's about breaking the cycle of the pattern, knowing that the pattern doesn't just start with you. You know, I would almost hedge a bet that if you look at the patterns that were playing out in your life, there were similar patterns that you could see in other family members' lives playing out as well, yeah?
Absolutely. You know, and that financial thing, my fear was around having seen my father and my brother, who ran a business together. They were also flying high not more than a few years before. And what I'd learned from watching my dad throughout my life was good things don't last. If you're earning good money, you need to be hanging on to that, because business might not continue to be the same. You know, you should be saving that money. And because we were being quite frivolous and enjoying what we had because we'd worked hard for it, there was always that guilt in me, and that thinking we shouldn't be spending this, we shouldn't be spending this. And that's really what I feel played out in when things started to go wrong, was those fears of good things not lasting and the money running out and you should be saving. All of that started to play out in my reality, but I didn't see it until I picked up that book and went, holy crap. I just I did this, but I can see how this happened. Yeah, and that was that financial cycle playing out, and I definitely wanted to break that for sure.
So the book really brought you into awareness of a pattern that had been playing out, not just in your own life, but in your family life. So you were starting to see that there's these epigenetic belief systems that are playing out. So what did you do then?
So at that point, after I had my little mini breakdown, I decided to get real about the changes that I needed to make in my life. So at the time, I was probably, because we were very busy, and I also had 2 kids with special needs that I was running around after, doing lots of appointments, doing everything I could in terms of early intervention so that they had the best outcomes possible. One of the ways in which I was managing my stress was by drinking quite often, most evenings, to relieve that stress. So one of the first changes I knew I had to make was to cut that out and start making healthier choices for me that were going to better support me. The next thing I decided to do after that was to choose which course I was going to study. So I knew I wanted to work in mental health. I knew I wanted to, well, not so much mental health, but personal development, helping women or people to heal from their emotional pain. My family also has a really strong history of mental illness, like very strong. Out of 7 kids, we've all had some issue or another play out in our lives in terms of mental health. But I always felt I did quite well because of the mindset work and you know, the being positive. And I did lots of things over the years to try and heal those patterns. And where was I going with that? So what did I do next? So I wanted to work in an industry helping others because I felt as though I had done really well in my own life. right? I'd created quite a good life, even though I came from a poor background, lots of mental health issues, and I wasn't, you know, stuck in bed every day or, you know, living a really bad life. Life was actually really good. So I felt as though I'd come far enough to be able to help other people. But then every time it came down to studying something, I never felt good enough. And I always felt that even if I get that qualification, am I really going to be able to help people? And that really worried me, which is why in the past I'd never pursued it and settled into the comfort of the family business, right? Because that was easier. If it's comfortable, why not? But yeah, so I started looking at counselling courses. I looked at studying psychology. I love nutrition, but nutrition doesn't make those mental changes that I was hoping to get for people. Like, nutrition's very helpful and I love it, and I encourage everyone to have a healthy diet and everything, but I really wanted something that was going to heal that deep emotional pain that I'd felt throughout my life. Even if I had managed to quiet it to a point, and I wanted something that was going to break those cycles. I started listening to a lot of the positive stuff that I used to listen to before I got married. So all the Hay House stuff, like I love Hay House authors. And that brought back into my awareness that importance of the bottom line with stress, with any health issues, is there's always a set of beliefs and emotions that keep us stuck and create that stress and illness in the first place. So I thought, if I can find a method that gets to those beliefs, then I'm on a winner. So counselling didn't do that. Psychology didn't do that. I looked at NLP. That seemed to look okay. But what I found when I looked at NLP was it was a really male-dominated industry. And it just lacked a bit of feeling for me in a way. It didn't really connect, I guess, on a heart level. So while it said it did that stuff mentally, there was something missing with it. And I did go to a course on NLP, but it just didn't quite hit the mark. And I found it was quite male dominated. And at this point, I only had a few months left to make my decision on what I was going to study. And I was talking to my sister and she said, oh, my friend just did this thing, Creatrix, and she says it's changed her life. You know how she's been struggling her whole life with this, this, and this. It's not a problem for her anymore. She feels amazing. So that's when I started to look at the Creatrix course. And that's when I found that it had that female focus that I was looking for. Because one of the things I realized in even listening to a lot of the Hay House stuff, you know, some of my favorite authors like Wayne Dyer, he's amazing and I'm very inspired by a lot of the stuff that he shared. But he had a wife looking after his kids and doing all of that while he was chasing his dreams and doing what he wanted to do and writing his books and going around speaking to people. And what was missing for me in that whole industry of self-help and personal development was a lot of those really strong female voices who had the families, who had the kids, but were still doing it anyway.
Yep.
And that's where I wanted that female focused approach. And while there is a lot of stuff available, like I think another thing that I came across was tapping. I seriously felt too embarrassed to sit there tapping. Like, I thought, if my husband walks on me and I'm tapping, he's going to go, what the hell are you doing? So, because I just didn't have any confidence in myself, and I was so afraid of what other people thought as well. So doing other methods like that for me wasn't really an option either. So when I came across Creatrix, it said it did all those things that I wanted to do, like clearing those epigenetic patterns. Because my mum had a terrible, terrible childhood, and I knew that we had inherited stuff from her. So clearing epigenetic patterns and something that really understood that we as females are so very different. We have a whole different set of challenges, and something that helps us to really thrive and step into our power as females, so that we can be the best that we can be while still doing the stuff we love to do, like looking after the kids and having the family. So I really believe women can have it all, but there was a disconnect on what I could find out there until I found Creatrix.
So you've just given me so many nuggets. The first one that I want to sort of highlight, I guess, is by the sounds of it, you made a very conscious decision to A, change your own life, and then B, look for a vehicle that could help you to instigate further change for yourself and then for others. So once you made that decision, it was then about research. And I think initially the first decision that it sounds like you made was, do I want to work in mental health or do I want to work in personal development? Because a lot of the time people think they're the same and they're not. They're very different approaches to different, I don't want to say different sets of issues, but in a way they are, because everything around both worlds requires a different approach. And that's really important, because I know we have a lot of women that have a desire to help in the mental health industry, and this and Creatrix, it's not the right fit for that world. So you made that decision and you did your research in regards to that first. Once you made that call in regards to how you wanted to help women, did you want to help people in that arena or do you want to help people in this arena? It was then about researching the methods that were available to you. And again, I know there's a lot of women that spend a lot of time doing exactly what you did. They read all of the books from the top gurus, a lot of which are male. You know, you're absolutely right. There are very few strong female voices in the industry of personal development. And the ones that are strong and well known are often following masculine models very well. And if you look at those women, you know, we love them all, but they are also masculine in nature themselves. They've got a strong masculine trait. So the fact that you were able to recognize that that was something missing in the industry and then go searching for something that filled that need within you first, that is what I want to talk about. Because there's, you know, we talk to women that have spent, you know, some tens of thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of hours following gurus and learning from all of these personal development experts, and they still come to us and say, it was all good and it all helped me to a certain degree, but there was something else missing, because there's something still missing inside of here. So when you found Creatrix, what was it, apart from epigenetical cycles, which is, you know, a major point of difference, but for someone who doesn't know what that even means, what was it about Creatrix that stood out when you compared it to things like NLP and tapping and all of the other stuff that you were looking at?
What was it that stood out? It was, I loved that it was for females. It was purely a female approach. It focused 100% on females, and it came from a female. That's probably what I loved the most, is that it was so tailored to us that it doesn't work for men. So it really did recognize each and every one of our differences. So that's probably the number one thing that stood out to me, is that it just, I don't know, it just connected with me. It was like, I want something that works for women. That was what I wanted. I want something that works for women. You know, I went to this NLP thing and that dude has no idea about women. Like, that's how I felt. And that's why my sister said, oh, well, that's where my friend had this thing and it's for women. So when I then researched it and watched all the videos and watched all the testimonials, and I saw the transformations that women were having, yours included, I thought, this is real. Like, this is for women, and it breaks those cycles, you know. And you, I think, also had the anger that I had, and that was one of my major issues in my life, was my anger, not so much towards my younger children, but my daughter, which is hence why she was at boarding school. And that was actually one of the things too that woke me up too, because we thought, because she was a major trigger for me. So while she was at boarding school, I was quite good, but then when we had our crisis, my anger just exploded again, even without her there. So that's where I knew also that was a deeper issue that needed to be addressed. So in terms of the course, it just ticked all my boxes. It ticked the fact that it was for females. It ticked that it broke those epigenetic cycles, like you mentioned. It I was looking at the time for a course that was in person as well. So that was one of the boxes that it ticked for me. It had the ongoing support, so I liked that it wasn't just a quick, you can learn this really quick and you're off. It was the ongoing support, the course following on from the course to help us after that. What else? I don't know. I found it, you know what, I didn't even know who Maz was. I didn't follow her on Facebook. I had never heard of Creatrix before. I found the course, I booked in for my call. I had the call with Kathy I talked to. She told me about the course. She told me about how much it had helped her as well. I knew that I wanted to start a business, and it was a course that I could do and then start a business. So that was the other thing that I loved about it. I didn't have to do 4 years of study before I could even work with a person. I could start getting practical experience soon after I'd done the major part of the course, which is the 6-day intensive part. Yeah, so I was looking for something that I could start a business with straight away, something that worked, something, you know, I think in the videos I watched, it was guaranteed results. So I'm like, this is going to help me do what I say I want to be doing with women. Yeah, but I read about Maz through whatever was available on the website. But other than that, like, I really didn't know anything about her. I just knew that the course did what I wanted it to do. So,
and at the time, sorry, you go, Dallin.
Yeah, so I just took the leap. I just signed up and went, this is it. This is the closest thing to what I'm looking for. So I'm going to do it.
And at the time that you made that decision as well, you guys were going through, you know, a financially stressful situation. So to make a decision to invest in yourself when finances, you know, you've already said it was one of your ongoing patterns of fear that was playing out was around money. So then to go and invest money in another course when you were already compounded on stress caused by finances, what made you do it anyway?
Because whatever was going to happen anyway with our business. I just knew that trying to be positive, right, trying to be optimistic about the future when I knew I had underlying beliefs that made it really hard for me to even peacefully visualize things working out, I knew I needed to address those beliefs and that our overall outcome would be better. Yeah, no matter what. And I also had a massive issue with guilt. And I remember saying to Kathy, look, as long as you can guarantee me that you can get rid of my guilt, because I can't, because me being guilty is going to be detrimental to us. So as long as you can guarantee that I can get rid of my guilt for spending this money on the course, I'm in.
And how do you feel about that now?
I don't feel guilty about anything these days. And also with those negative patterns around the money, I've been able to completely address them so that when I do meditation now, and when I do want to visualize, you know, the future that I want, I can do that from a place of complete contentment and peace. Yeah. So it's not like you're trying to force something to happen. So prior to doing Creatrix and prior to doing the course, the best I could manage, and in all seriousness, was the feeling of relief. Feeling of relief when money would hit the bank account so I could afford to pay the bills. That was the best I could manage. I couldn't kind of see past that, because that's where we were at. So to be able to now, when I do focus on what I do want to create for the future, to be able to do that with a complete sense of peace and calm and wholeness, that feels way better. Yeah, and that's what Creatrix has given to me, is that peace of mind, the peace in my mind, the love in my heart, you know, the calm in my body. I used to be chronically stressed, and I didn't realize how not stressed I am until I spoke to a woman who was just like I was 3 years ago, and seeing her struggle like I was. because that's just not my life anymore. I didn't know how I was going to get out of working in the business. I was working 5 days a week in our business, but I did my course and I got back from my course and I went, you know what, I'm going to fit in the work I've got to do for you within 2 days a week, and I've got the other 3 days for me. And then over time, and I now have 4 days for me, and I've only got to do 1 day in his business. Not to mention what that's done for our marriage. I mean, we were struggling as a couple working together in business and being in each other's faces all the time for the last, we've been married, I think 13 years this year. 14 years this year. So to be able to step away and now have our own separate lives and be able to come back together at the end of the day, and I can talk about my work and what I love doing, and my husband can vent to me about his business, that's done wonders for our marriage. Because honestly, if not for Creatrix, I don't think we'd be together anymore. And it's funny because one of my biggest fears was that because I was, because we used to, throughout our marriage, we would enjoy a few drinks together on a regular basis. So when I made that decision to cut that out of my life and then also do Creatrix and do personal development, I'm like, I'm going to really change, and he might not like who I become. That might be really hard for him. And while it's not been completely smooth, it has actually gone really well. And I find if you just I just put the focus on myself and becoming the best that I could be, and I gave him the freedom to do what he wanted, because it's not up to me to change him either. And he actually has really just come along for the ride, and he's been completely supportive and encouraging throughout this journey with me in my business. But that, to be honest, that was one of my biggest worries, is what's going to happen to us when I change. But it's been really good, and to have that now, that separate life. I'm now starting to develop that financial independence. I have completely stepped into who I am as a person, and I can stand really strong in that. Whereas before I had completely adopted his life and did what he wanted. Now it's like, you know what, this is who I am. And I just, like I said, there's a real sense of peace and calm in that, but a real strength in that too. Finally feeling like I can just be myself, which is something my whole life I was never able to do.
So talk to us about your life as a transformologist now, because we know that Creatrix is fantastic, and it's it's the largest piece of the puzzle in terms of being able to create change in ourselves and in other women. What's it been like now that you're a transformologist and you've got this business structure that has, given you what you've gained now? Can you give us a little inside view into what that's like for you?
So it's interesting because it's funny when you think I'm going to do a course and I'm going to get this qualification and I'm going to be able to help all these people, and you kind of expect them just to be there and to want your services straight away. And that's not really what happens, especially if you're brand new in business for yourself. Well, not for me anyway, that's not what happened. Yeah. I was a very private person before. I had a very small following on Facebook, and, there was a lot of work I had to do, and I didn't really talk about what I was going to be doing either, because I was so private. So once I did my course, I found myself wanting, to be busy all of a sudden, and I did actually have to work through those high expectations of myself. And there was a bit of an adjustment period of realizing this is a business, and I'm now going to have to put work into doing that, and I'm now going to have to do a whole heap of stuff I've never ever done before, and that was a bit scary. But I was just determined to do it, so I pushed through. So I followed what the course said to do, and I created the workshops, I did the workshops, I talked to people, I've shared my story, and I did a lot of that. But it just, for me, it's been a really interesting journey as a woman who wasn't in business before for myself. So it took a while for me to kind of figure out, to find my feet in that and who I was in that. So it has been a little bit of a journey for me just to become really clear on who I am, within my business and with what I can offer with Creatrix for my clients and who my ideal clients are. But once I got clear on that and was able to get really honest with myself and be able to completely and freely express who I am, what my journey's been, and how I can help people, I think that's really helped me to build trust with people and also to connect with people, because I was actually really scared about sharing my story about my anger because it's not a nice thing for women to have, is it? It's not a nice thing to admit that you used to yell or even sometimes scream at your 5-year-old or 3-year-old because she was so difficult. It's not something we talk about as women. So I was like, oh, I don't really want to talk about that. But then I realized that the people that I might be worried about seeing that wouldn't watch it anyway. They're going to switch off as soon as I start talking about anger, because they're like, well, I'm not angry, I don't need to watch this. And then that I would still be able to reach the women that do need to hear how I used to struggle with it, but also how I've been able to change and then how I can help them. So since I've really stepped into and owned that part of myself and that part of my journey and that part of my struggle, I've found just that I've been able to connect with so many more women, and that's opened up the door for them to then reach out to me and speak to me about their struggle with anger. And that's allowed me to then, you know, get clients who I've really been able to help through those issues of anger, through issues of being able to express themselves, through issues of feeling responsible for everyone's happiness and for everyone else, which is also another thing, you know, and that's, I think, why I adopted other people's, you know, fell into my husband's life, and then I felt responsible for upkeeping this, I don't know, this thing. So just being able to help women through their issues and see their progress has just been amazing. And every woman that I've worked with, you know, when I talk to her after her breakthrough and I say, how has this, you know, what's your overall experience with Creatrix been? Every time they say, well, it's just been life-changing. And that is what I set out to achieve when I was looking for a course. That is what I set out to do. So to be able to, once I found my feet, once I was able to own my story and get out there and talk about it, I just feel as though a whole new world has opened up to me.
And when you think about, you know, you found a course, you did the course, you've had your journey of business, and every woman's journey is different. You know, some are really fast, some takes a little while to find your feet. It's all okay because the support system is in place while you're doing all of that. But once you found that and you started working with women, can you share with us, what is it like when you sit across from a client and you've built this relationship with her, she's given you her past, you've got her issues there in front of you, and you start to break her through those big chunky things that keep her up at night, that limit her from living her best life, and you sit across from her after she's released that. What is that like for you as a transformologist to know that you've made that kind of impact in another woman's life?
It's the best feeling in the world. Like it is it's indescribable, knowing how much of a difference that's making to them, seeing them break through. You can see sometimes during the session, it's like their whole face lifts. You know, you can see them releasing and letting go, and you know that they're never going to be the same and that they're never going to struggle with those issues again. That's the feeling that I set out to kind of have in terms of when I wanted to work with people. I didn't just want to help them cope. I wanted them to be free. So I don't know, it's just the best feeling in the world. Like, seriously, I don't know how to describe it. It's heartwarming. It's just a massive blessing to be a part of it. It's exactly, I don't know, it's exactly what I was chasing, is that feeling of knowing I've made a difference. And I think one of my favorite things has been with a client I'm working with at the moment, is when she's talking to me, she goes, yeah, this came up this week and my husband said, oh, you should talk to Naomi about that. So to have a husband on board too, seeing this amazing difference, you know, in his wife. And it's funny because the husband sometimes sees my husband and he says, because I've got to keep it confidential, obviously, but what has your wife hypnotized you too? Even though we don't do hypnosis. But he said, I've been telling my wife for years that she's good enough and that she could do this stuff, and she never did. And after a week of working with your wife, she's finally doing it. He's like, this is amazing. Yeah. It's the best thing in the world. So to see that it makes that kind of impact and to hear that kind of feedback from a husband as well, that's awesome. Like, and for him to then say to her now, oh, you need to talk to Naomi about that, because he knows it works because he can see the difference in her. Yeah. So that's amazing. Yeah. That's the best.
And so that feeling that you get to have with your clients when you see her free from her heaviness, does that feeling make it worth it? The whole journey, the searching for the program, the running through the course, the ups and the downs of your own journey, because we all, you know, we are consistently stepping up to new levels and that's not always comfortable. Mm. The investment and the time that you've put into it, has all of that been worth it to be able to sit across from a client like who you're working with now and know that you're really making a significant difference in her life?
Absolutely. Like every single part of it has been worth it, but I wouldn't be doing anything else, because this is what I was born to be doing. This is my purpose. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I would never second guess that or question it, because I know that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. And all those parts of the journey that get a bit bumpy or that are difficult, they are what teach you what you need to know so that you can be better at what you need to be doing. You know, it's like, I see it as the journey as this: you need to come into an awareness of what's wrong. Sometimes it takes crisis to do that, sometimes not, but usually it has to be more uncomfortable to stay the same and to change, as you know. Then creatrix will clear anything you need it to clear. And for me, that's really like been the easy part, to be able to have creatrix, because I know that no matter what comes up, it's gone really quick. And it's easy to own the really dark parts of yourself, because you know that with creatrix you can get that wisdom around those issues really quickly. And then the third part is taking action. And that can probably be the hardest part, because that's where we need to do stuff that we've never, ever, ever done before. And that's going to be uncomfortable because you've never done it before. You're learning, you need to find your groove with it, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're even going to fail. And that can be a bit scary, but through doing all of that, that's the best part, because that's where you become. That's the becoming of the journey. And there's a lot of talk, you know, in the world of manifestation and all of that. And I don't really believe in manifestation. I believe that you have your vision, and what you need to do is work as much of who you would be in that vision into today. And if you can put that person into the actions of today and into the person you are today, you will become that person in no time, because through doing those actions, you are that. So that's how I believe you become what you're meant to be. It's not about sitting down meditating and it'll all come to you. It's the experiences and what you do on the way that helps you to become. Yeah. And that's probably been the biggest thing that I've learned in my journey, I think. And I think that's the biggest thing, and that's probably my favorite thing.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that would also be then the advice that you would give. You know, if you were to talk to Naomi of 3 years ago, or a woman who's watching this who resonates with who you were those years ago, and she was thinking, this is, you know, I want to be like Naomi now, that would also be the advice, is, you know, own it. Well, you tell us, what would your advice be to her?
Yeah, own it. Own what needs to change. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge you have an issue or a number of issues that need to be addressed. You know, have creatrix and trust the process, because it works. It works 100% hands down better than anything else you'll ever try. And then take the action. because through taking the action, then you then get to become the woman that you want to be.
Yeah.
That would be my advice. Just do it. Like, just trust in the process, trust in yourself, trust that you will be, you know, led to where you need to be for you, because we're all different and we all have a different journey. But know that through that creatrix process, you're going to be more in touch with yourself than you've ever been. And through having that close connection with who you really are, you can then do the things that you need to do with, I think, like that strength I mentioned before. So with that strength in yourself and with that certainty of who you are, you can then, that carries out into your life in what you want to do.
And that's how we help people.
Yeah,
that's how we're going to set those 10 million hearts free.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Naomi, thank you so much. I could talk to you, I think, for hours, because there's just lots of wisdom coming out of you left, right and centre. But thank you so much for your time. I truly hope that for the women who do watch our conversation, that it inspires them to, you know, own what's going on for them, to take action, and to know that with the process that is laid out and available to you, you've got ongoing creatrix for yourself as you need it, so that you can ultimately help the women that you're here on the planet to help. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. There's, you know, it's all very well and good for us to live our best lives, but if there's still women out there, it's like those angry mums that you weren't able to talk to before because you were so, you know, caught up in all the other shit. They're still out there angry. And if we don't get over ourselves so that we can go out there and help, whether it's the angry mum or the stressed out wife or the disconnected partner, it doesn't matter what her issue is, nothing's going to change for her if we don't step up to the plate. And that's what you've done so beautifully over the last couple of years. It's been an absolute joy watching, and I can't wait to see how you continue to do that, because I know that there are a lot of women that are going to benefit from your journey, Naomi. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Brie.